I'm inclined to agree with you now. I think that there were probably around 300 times over the last 5 years that, I had wished that I had the ability to acquire the technology that you have and that we're using. Because it's interesting because we weren't able to, I focused more on crunching the data from the previous expedition. What happened? How were we able to document it? Where were they? What was their behavior? What was the exact area that they, favored over and over and over again? The repetitive nature of the data would tell us this story, and it really is just a question of looking at it. So I agree with you. I think that regardless of whether it was, if something was to happen in this area, they shut it down, whatever happens, it really is of no consequence at this point. That'll just add a little more time to the inevitable because at this point, not having all of the equipment from the beginning has really forwarded our understanding of what's going on because that was really all we could focus on. How do we get closer? How do we get better documentation? Through understanding their behavior, the things they prefer to the areas they prefer. How do they relate to the cover? How do they relate to, the wilderness in general? What's their relationship to the game trails that we frequently find deer tracks and hog tracks on? How all of that stuff has enabled us to get this understanding that now, I can have somebody call and say, I need to know, where can I go? And they can send me a satellite shot of, 100 square miles and I can point them in the right direction. You know what I mean? So I think we are going to get this done, Scott, but also as safe as we can. I mean, how safe can you be when you're surrounded by these things? Well, Mel and I are still here, and you can attest to the fact that we are around them. So I think there's a good chance, Scott, that nothing's going to happen when it does occur. You know what I mean? I think we're going to put ourselves in harm's way, and then we're going to see what happens and film it. I think the worst case situation, Scott, is they're going to find cameras with incredible footage on them.
Yeah, that's the worst.
That's worst case, right?
And the thing is, the research that we've done thus far, right, although it doesn't, we've got the evidence in front of the right audience to prove these things exist today. What that crystal clear footage that we're going to get is going to do is open up the door to people who will test the DNA that we already have. That will go back and look at the infants that we have pictures of, the family behavior that we have pictures of, the males, the females. I've got breast on these things I got a picture of.
Yeah.
The evidence that we have that isn't quite clear enough to attract everybody's attention will be examined thoroughly once we get that clear video or that clear photograph. And that's what we're after, and it will happen, and it's going to happen soon. It's just a matter of getting out there and getting it done.
Yeah. So where we're at right now with all of this essentially is we're in a holding pattern for a couple more weeks. Once the necessary repairs happen and the acquisition of the new technology happens, you and we already know what to do and where to do it. So it's just a question of you getting back down here and you and I executing. Execution is everything. It's something that Melanie and I have really put a lot of effort into, staying predictable in our research when we go in, right? We can't control what they're going to do. So, the controls in our experiments are where our behavior is concerned. And, you've witnessed that it does work doing that. But entering into this situation, I'm still apprehensive. I don't know if I know you didn't film the results of what happened to me, but you can attest to the fact that I was straight up nauseous coming out of there. And once we all settled down, my first inclination, once the adrenaline in my hands started shaking, because my hands were shaking so bad for the first 15 minutes after it, that I was having trouble, it was strange, man. My whole body reaction to what happened. But again, there was no weird, electronic anomalies, or I didn't feel shocked like electricity or anything. This was straight up adrenaline and nerves. But I was throwing up,
Yeah.
and that's how that sighting affected me. through the thermal.
You should be scared of these things. You should be apprehensive. I mean, when this thing comes to light and people realize what we are doing, they're going to say, wow, you guys are a bunch of dumbasses. I mean, these are 10-foot monsters out in the woods. They are monsters, and they are aggressive, and they're not friendly little cuddly teddy bears. But when they figure out what we're doing, and we know what we're doing, it's dangerous, okay? But it's got to be done. And once they figure that out, then they're going to understand that, you know.
Well, it's so important, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I can understand the outside perspective because, you know, and really all of us can because we came from it. Whether or not, you know, we've had an encounter or not, and we're in the field researching or you know, if we, you know, are still in the belief stage of this entire thing, we've come from ignorance about this whole thing and just, you know, having seen something on television or whatever, and then going into the field and learning. You know, the one thing that has, you know, become real obvious to me is that there's a complete lack of understanding for what's going on. I've got people constantly contacting me, making suggestions like, oh yeah, man, just, you know, lay a cot out there and sleep out under the stars right there. And, you know, my response is, you know, and they say things like they won't hurt you. Well, my thing is like, I don't think these people fully realize how these creatures survive. These things are capable of jumping distances that you can't fathom and landing on a 350-pound hog, picking the 350-pound hog up and by its back legs, swinging it over their head by its back legs and smashing it on the ground, at which point they either walk off with it dead, with a broken back, a broken neck, a crushed, you know, whatever, the whole chest cavity crushed. But the thing is when they feed, they're feeding on raw. They're ripping this thing apart, man. These are primitive hominoids, man. And for someone to suggest that they fully understand what's going on as to whether or not they're going to hurt you or not is irresponsible. And I refuse to feed into that. The reality of the situation is that hundreds of times, and I've got eyewitnesses and people who were with us when they've come into our campsite and removed things from coolers and hovered outside the tents, thrown things at the tents, almost, you know, in hindsight, thinking maybe they were egging us on to come out.
They're superior to us in the woods, and they know it.
I think they know it too, Scott. And that to me, you know, granted, I've been saying this for 5 years. Their confidence and really arrogance can be exploited, and we've done that, and we're going to continue to do that. The problem is the situation that you and I are about to embark on is a completely different ballgame. I saw the reaction they had when they realized we could see them, and it was not the same as the other situations when we couldn't see them and they were all around us because it was pitch black, you know, or they just stayed just outside the IR of my camera. You can see the bushes moving, you know, but it was completely different, and it felt different, I think, because they knew, I think, Scott, I think they realized, holy shit, these guys can see us. And it was interesting the way they reacted, you know. That paralleling us thing, trying to get out in front of us, it was like weird because they started to do that first. And that was when I was like, whoa, we got to go. And I tried to get out in front of them because they were on our right-hand side as we were leaving. What would have happened? We don't know. That's my thing, right? So, and I said this to somebody the other day. I said, listen, belief will get people killed. Knowledge will keep people safe. And the amount of knowledge that I have and what I've seen and what my wife and I have experienced, and now what my wife and I have experienced with you, I think it demands that we proceed with as much caution as we can. Because when I tell you that when you see what I saw through that thermal, it was not a man. It was not man-like. It was what you would classify in a horror film as a monster. This thing's head had to weigh 45 pounds. This thing's chest was massive. its shoulders were 30 inches from its eyes. The edge of its shoulders looked like balloons, man. The muscles on the sides of this thing. It was every bit the specimen that I saw in 2013 had jumped a trail. And while it did appear to be intelligent, hey man, people have been out there shooting guns off. The FWC's been burning their habitat down probably since its inception of the wildlife management program. I think that they have a bit of an attitude about human beings out there. This is a spot where Melanie's been hit with rocks, and we've had branches thrown at us, and the negative, what you would perceive as negative reactions abound in this area, and I think that's one of the reasons why it was so intense for me what I saw, and what happened to us. So we got to be careful, buddy.
We will, but we're going to do it again. I mean, we got to accept a certain amount of risk. That's just got to happen.
It does, doesn't it?
And we do go running, chasing at them, throwing rocks at them. But
yeah, no, those days are over.
Yeah.
People said, "How are you going to do this?" When I started, I said, "I'm going in after him." And this one guy online said, "Yeah, you're going to die." And I'll tell you something. If I had kept that up, I'm not sure he would have been wrong. Because,
well, here's the thing, Mark. People say they never hurt people, but here's the thing: if they would have decided to snatch us up, you still wouldn't have known that they hurt people because we simply would have been hikers that disappeared.
That's right.
That happens all the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have that in our run area. We've discussed that many times. I've got a guy right now researching the missing people, and he can find nothing. Nothing. They have made 2 human beings and their disappearance vanish from history. In the exact area that you heard Melanie calling them in. That's where they went missing. And this guy's been looking now for a couple weeks. But I already looked when it was happening. There was nothing on the news, nothing online, nothing in the papers, nothing. And the FWC in the area, the officers that were involved in it basically refused to comment on it.
Yeah, and they keep it quiet, and there are legitimate reasons to keep that stuff quiet, but at some point they should release that information.
Yeah.
But you just never know. That's the thing, you just never know. You can't say they're not aggressive, and you can't say they don't attack, because
you don't know.
Yet. We're going to find out.
Yeah.
We just don't know that yet.
Well, I mean, I'm inclined to go with everything is going to be fine, and we're going to get the shit scared out of us again, but we're going to walk out with some valuable footage. And in looking at this, for me, based on my own experience, and that's the only thing I have to go off of, right? My prior research. Right. I think we're going to be okay. That doesn't make me feel better about doing it, but at the same time, I think we're going to walk away from this and we're going to have what we need.
Well, we have to go in there with that attitude because that's the only way. If I was going to go in there with the attitude that I knew for a fact that they're going to rip me limb from limb and then eat the remains, I don't think I'd go. I think I'd go back and find me a nice PlayStation game.
There you go.
But
go back to sleep.
So we got to go in there with the fact that we're going to get this done and it'll be fine. But once we get it done, that's going to be a whole different ball game. The implications, I don't think a lot of people have thought of the implications of discovering this thing and bringing it to light. The value to the biomedical research companies of this thing's DNA, the value to the immunology people. This thing's got to have a hell of an immune system. And just from the looks of them, the genetic variation in this species is so broad that's going to be huge. Not to mention, can you imagine having a military SEAL team that could go in, accomplish their mission, and get out and never even be seen? Can you imagine the value of that? I mean, how much do we spend training our human SEAL teams when, 2 of these things could – it's going to be huge once we get it done.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen. And I think that a lot of it is going to be positive. I think the eventual impact on the consciousness of mankind is going to be a positive thing. I know that, it's popular culture to share, fear-based thinking on, and predictions about stuff. Oh, it's going to ruin this. It's going to ruin that. But, that's not necessarily true. I think that the discovery, the realization is a better way to put it. The realization of the discovered ones, because we've known about this for a long time. It's really, can we provide the landslide data to overcome the powers that be and the ridiculous perspectives they've aided the public in generating in their minds? We can do that. And I think that once that realization does sink in, the possibilities for positive impact on our culture, on mankind's thinking, are limitless, because those things that we all know need to happen with the environment, the protective stuff, the protection of habitats, the taking environmental, poisoning of the environment with the corporations and the outflows of toxic and all this. There's so many things that can change. The development of new technologies to aid us in eliminating toxins that are released into the environment. These are going to be necessities. Yep. And I see this as something that's beneficial for all of us, not just, the Sasquatch.
It will long term. Long term, it's going to be a super positive thing. Short term, market's going to rock some people's worlds. There's going to be some chaos in the short term when we reveal what these things are and we get this done.
Yeah, well, hey, it's like everything else, right? There's going to be both sides of the coin, and adjustments are going to have to be made. Whether or not people take this seriously now, I can tell you that in the near future, they're not going to have a choice but to take it seriously. And whether it's you and I and Melanie that provide that information, or somebody else, if they come out finally and they explain it, remains to be seen. But I don't see any other way that it can happen. You're going to get both sides. It's always the same. You know what I mean? You get both sides of the equation, and then somewhere in the middle, everybody meets, and then, it starts to move forward with how to handle this situation. It's like everything else. And, if we can survive all of the stuff that, we've been surviving over the decades, what is there to be afraid of with this? It's not like you're not still going to be able to go hunting. I mean, they are so embedded in the environment and are so indifferent to human beings that most people don't even believe they're real. Nothing is going to change in that aspect because they are what they are. Few and far between are people who've seen these things. There's 8.5 billion people on Earth, and in a few thousand people have actually reported seeing them. So we're looking at something that I think has been blown out of proportion, the validation and its impact on the initial. I really think that, because I think most people are going to go, wow, I had a feeling that it was real. And that's going to be the end of it for them, because the bottom line is most people live in cities, and this has zero impact on them initially. Right. You know what I mean?
Right. But then you've got that small group of people that are going to say, well, little Joey went missing in the woods 20 years ago. Maybe we should go back and take a look at that.
This is definitely, I think, something that's going to have to come out. But at the same time, when you look at it, the governing authoritarian organizations, man, and institutions in this country are lockjawed and tight-lipped about it, and I don't see where that's going to change. What they do is they ignore the general public. I thought they worked for us. Obviously, they don't. And looking at the situation, I don't see. What are they going to do? Start answering people's questions? Create liability? That's the one thing they avoid: liability. And I don't think that's going to change. I think that, it's still going to be a mystery. But in the future, I think there will be obvious questions about the perpetrators when people come up missing. So in handling it in the future, there'll need to be some new protocols put in place. But the reality is what can we change about the institution but the people that work in the institution? And in the end, it's like protocol is protocol. When you're brought in as an agent, when you're brought in as a construction worker, the nature of the training you receive is to get you to align with what needs to be done for the organization, not your mission. So I don't see anything changing there. You know what I mean? You get a whistleblower, and I think we've all seen it. Whistleblowers are being threatened and put in jail. You know what I mean? It's like, this guy's telling the truth about what you're actually doing to the American people, and you want to put him in jail because he's telling the truth. But this is what they do. I mean, even Obama was doing that. You know what I mean? Like, encourage the whistleblower. Well, then the whistleblower comes forward. Next thing you know, they're looking at jail time, or they're wanted by the U.S. government. Like, that's a setup. You know what I mean? So, I look at all that stuff, and it's like, we don't have any control over that. If we focus on what we can control, within ourselves, then things begin to change on the outside. And I always say the same thing, man. Bigfoot research is incidental to what we're really trying to get people to do, which is take a look in the mirror at the way you're evaluating the information that's being presented. How can you contribute to the situation in a positive way? Let go of that fear-based thinking, and let's start thinking, solution-oriented, patterns and thinking. I think that's the way to move this forward. Mel and I have been doing that for 5 years now, and I think it shows. You've been privy to that yourself. What's your take on what we're doing, and what's your take on how this has been progressing?
I think it's progressing perfectly. Like I said, you've gathered your information, the methods that you've developed, you've proven that they work. And I think we're in the end game. I hate to take the Avengers title, but I think we're in the end game there. Thing up, and it's not going to be long. It's just not going to be long. We've got to figure it out. These things are so good at what they do. It took us 2,000 years or so to figure out that they were in the backyard, but I think we've got it done. And basically, we just need that clear picture, and that's really what I'm focused on right now, is getting that clear picture. Yeah,
and I can tell you right now, Scott, if we get what I saw last Saturday on film, it's going to freak people out, because when I tell you that I've been around them on many occasions, and I've seen them on many occasions with my own two eyes while I was filming them, and never felt that freaked out.
What's the first thing your parents told you when you were a child? There's no such thing as monsters. Well, that's a lie. There are monsters.
Yeah.
They're out in our yards.
Yeah, well, what we would classify, that definitely fits the description. Now, I know what they are, and I know, from seeing all of the footage, reviewing the footage, seeing how they behave and all that stuff. But I was not unprepared for what I saw through that thermal.
Nope.
And to be honest with you, I think it was more scary because of the thermal, because it looked like a giant red devil. It just was like, let me rephrase that, a giant red, flaming hot, burning eye sockets, terrifying, scowling, pissed off devil monster is what it looked like. If it was without the thermal and it was in daytime, I think it may have affected me differently. But
you probably would not even have known it was there.
Yeah, just the animation of the added colors from the heat signature was like enough to push me over the edge and start throwing up. You know what I mean? and it was funny because when we were leaving, 2 or 3 times I'm like, I'm going to throw up. I'm thinking to myself, and I'm like, don't throw up. Whatever you do, don't throw up. And at the end there, I couldn't stop it. I fought it off for like 10 minutes, man. And then when we started walking off, I was like, oh, God. And it just came up,
It was just sheer happenstance that I was not recording, because if I was recording that, it'd be out there on YouTube already.
And here's the thing, like Mel and I agreed, like we're going to show what happens. So like I would have shown it. Yeah. I would have shown it. I have no shame in it. It's like, look, this is what I just experienced, and this is how it affected me, man. You know what I mean? It's interesting because that affected me more than the charge that I received somehow. I won't get into, what I think that was, but I'll say this. I think that what we witnessed the first night flying around has something to do with the electrical interference on that situation I shot in 2015 or 16. I think I think that what happened was I walked into a field that was already there. The camera clearly, that footage clearly shows that field intensifying. The electrical disturbance intensifies on my camera as I continue walking. And where it peaked was where I was feeling really bad. It actually felt like I was going to have a heart attack. And it was interesting because at the same time, it was almost like a switch went off. It just shut off. And the footage clearly outlined. I mean, you can see that, right?
Yeah, you can see that clearly. And the thing is, I mean, it could be that whatever organization it is that's doing this, or whatever individuals they are, they could be trying to protect us, because they could know that these things are dangerous. And people get zapped in the Bigfoot world all the time, and they always say, well, Bigfoot zaps you. Well, not necessarily.
No.
You may be walking into an EMP field or being hit from a long-range EMP device.
Yeah, or just something hovering above you. Like the one realization that I had that is a stark realization, and something that I really feel uncomfortable about, is if these things were there the whole time, it explains quite a bit. And the devices, whatever they were, if these craft were there the whole time, it really upset me. And I'm inclined to think that they were, because you can't see them. You know what I mean? You can't hear them. So how would you know? How would you know? Well, maybe, and this is just my theory, maybe we do know that they were hovering above us that night because my camera and my physical experience clearly showed that something was there doing this. We both saw the intelligent operation of these craft. They appeared to be exploring that area. I mean, would you agree? Or
they definitely be going back and forth and
taking, using the strobe. I mean,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I don't know. More needs to be revealed about that, Scott. But and when we went in on the night of the encounter last Saturday, there was something about a mile off. But I didn't want to say conclusively that it was them again, because there was quite a bit of cloud cover. And when I could see them through the NVG. And when I removed the NVG, I could see clouds. I couldn't see the devices. So I can't conclusively say that they weren't planes, because the clouds could have been blocking the actual planes, the flashing lights of the planes. But I didn't see them. So, I mean, was it them or?
They were too close for planes. They were a lot lower than any type. We would have heard any type of an aircraft.
Well, no. I mean, excuse me. I mean, last Saturday, I saw a couple of flashing lights way off over that cow pasture. But the cloud cover, when I pulled it up, I saw the cloud cover, because remember we were heading into what was a storm that initially was over that area and had moved further west. So there was still some of that sparse rain cloud cover over the cow pasture. I was wondering if it was preventing me from seeing the blinking with my own two eyes. The fact is, though, when I put that goggle down and I looked, there were bright lights flashing over that field. They were just, probably a mile away, So I can't conclusively say that it was them again. But,
right.
But hey, here's the other thing. The night that they were hovering right over the research area where we had our encounter, in fact, there were no Sasquatch to speak of that night. The fact that if they were there, they were farther away, and there were Sasquatch there, is data to me. I look at it like, this is, another piece of information that we can use. Are they, in fact, doing what you and I talked about and providing some kind of an electromagnetic influence to keep them back in those bushes? Is that what's going on? I don't know, but I think it's an interesting theory.
Well, if there's a link, and I think we both think that there is a link between the two, then that would be another really, really good, easy way of finding out where the Sasquatch were. You put some third-generation MVGs and you see these things flying, you're going to find Sasquatch there.
Yeah, well, that would be interesting, right?
That was really easy, to figure that.
Yeah, and again, this is hypothetical and conjecture at this point, but at the same time, we do have data that shows conclusively that there's some kind of electromagnetic interference in this area, and there were Sasquatch there. You can attest to this. So,
And the Sasquatch weren't happy. If I remember your record of the event, the Sasquatch were throwing a fit while that was going on, were they not?
they were, yeah. Actually, one knocked a tree down as it ran, and I mean ran on two legs, and it was big. But there was another one in the bushes that stayed and was pounding on the ground. It was pounding on the ground, and from 30 to 35 feet away, Melanie and I heard multiple impacts and felt multiple impacts travel through the ground and up our boots. But there was definitely at least one of them pounding on the ground. And then we had walked around the side of the bush to try to get a shot into the bush, and it started growling. That was when I said, it's time to go. It's time to go. So we backed off. We'd already spent enough time there, had enough ridiculousness going on. I almost had a heart attack because of whatever it was that was shocking me. The whole situation is, when you're this is the way I looked at it, right? I'm in the bushes, or I'm in this area, and I'm in the wilderness. Never in the millions of times that I've been out there, like I grew up out here, you know what I mean? Have I ever experienced anything like this? And, while I hadn't spent a lot of time at night in these areas, I'd been out there enough to know that this is not normal what's happening. And
Right.
when we see, you and I, what's out there and flying around, I can't help but wonder if the two incidents aren't linked. And I think that's a viable avenue for, proceeding into an investigation on it. I know you and I talked about it, and it is our goal to continue trying to document that as a matter of incident and just being in the area. So when we first go in, we're going to try to see if they're there. I think that's crucial, because if they are, again, and there are no Sasquatch, now we've got two incidents where the craft were right there where the Sasquatch typically are, and the Sasquatch weren't there. And then,
Right.
and then if it holds true by the other side of that coin, there appeared to be none hovering over the research area, and they were there. We had an encounter.
That would also indicate that they're having trouble controlling these things.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they came back, right?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
So they go to ground when they're hanging around. I mean, they would also indicate another. I mean, there's a long line of things that we can say about that, because that also links to my belief that they can see into the IR spectrum. And,
That does, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
we'll get.
Well, listen. What's your deal? What we got about 2 more weeks?
I will be back. I think I can be out there this coming weekend. I won't have my thermal gear other than the other one that records. I'll have that one thermal because my FLIR is off getting repaired right now, and so I won't have the equipment that we need for a really good night operation. But I can go out there this coming weekend if you want.
Well, that sounds interesting. I mean, I think what we can do is we can run a test on the iOS FLIR that we have that hooks to the iPad. We've been unable to shoot footage with it in this area, and now I'm starting to wonder. Well, here's the thing. You still have the night vision. So if we're out there and the batteries begin to drain again off of my iOS FLIR and the craft are there, that's more valuable data. If the thing works and it holds its battery the whole time and we don't see those craft, that's more valuable data to whether or not they have anything to do with the presence of the Sasquatch. So I think either way, we're going to get data. And I think, that's one of the things I think early on, what I realized is this, right? It doesn't matter if the Sasquatch are present. There's valuable data to be had, because if they're not present, now it's my job as a researcher to begin to implement the factors that would play into that, right? And start to collect data on that. Well, we went at 12 noon. It was 96 degrees with 97% humidity. And in these areas, we had no activity. They were, more exposed to the sunlight and to the heat. Well, we found an area that same day under the same exact temperature and humidity conditions that had a 4-degree temperature difference or a 6-degree temperature difference under a canopy, and we got nothing but action. So there's valuable data in all of it, and that's I think where you coming down, it doesn't matter what happens, we're still going to get something out of it.
I agree. Plus, that other thermal will record. Like I said, you got that shot I sent you last night of the movement through the bushes.
It's awesome. Excellent stabilization, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. You can clearly see. And here's the thing: you gotta realize this, folks. That footage is being shot as I'm describing the individuals that I'm seeing through the FLIR with the red hot heat signature. So Scott's standing there filming at least one of the individuals that I'm eyewitnessing at that moment. So that's corroborating evidence that I was indeed seeing this, that we did in fact encounter something that fits the exact description of a giant Sasquatch. In fact, several.
Yeah, there's two in that thermal. There's actually one standing there. He's not as dark, as hot.
That's right. He's right in the middle.
And the other one moves behind him. The other one moves from.
He does, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He turns and goes back into the bush behind the other one.
Yeah, and he's moving from your right to your left. So I think that's probably one of the ones that started to circle ahead.
I think so too. But listen, man, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and I want to thank you especially for contacting me, because this has been probably the most rewarding networking with another researcher that Melanie and I have been able to do. We both talked about this, and we're really excited about continuing what's going on, and to its inevitable conclusion, whatever that may be. I think that there's a lot of value in being willing to work with other people, and this is just a perfect example of what can happen.
Right.
We were able to invite you in, and you are in fact corroborating these experiences that we're having and documenting them on film. It's absolutely incredible. I thank you for your participation, your willingness really to listen, because I do see that. You know what I mean? You're really paying attention to what I'm saying about how they behave and where they're at, and I can see you in real time lensing out these situations based on the data from the prior expeditions and the things that we've been telling you, and it's just commendable. I really do. So many times we've taken people in the field with us, and they kind of have their own ideas, and they seem to not really be listening to what we're trying to, help them to get better documentation. That's not the case, Scott, and you've upped our game, and you've really upped the documentation, and have been an asset to Melanie and I's work in these areas, and I just really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. This means everything to Melanie and I because of what we've been witnessing. People need to understand, and there's so much information out there that really comes from people that have absolutely no experience in the field, no long-term observation that they can, really base any conclusions off of. That's not the case with us, and you've helped to solidify that. So again, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just glad and honored to be a part of the whole situation. I mean, the non-cooperation in the Bigfoot community, if you can call it that, is why we're in the dark today. And by cooperating with everything that we're learning and taking, any experience from other researchers in and working it into our technique, we're going to get this thing done. And as far as you other researchers out there, if you've got good information, good video in your back pocket, it's time to put it out there, because we are bringing it. We're going to have this done, and it's not going to be long. And that's a fact. So,
well, Scott, look, thanks for coming on the show and corroborating the stuff that we've all been experiencing. Look, I'll get on the phone with you here, and we'll set up the next expedition, whether it's this week or the following week. We'll figure that out. Listen, guys, you've been listening to another broadcast of Truth with Crypto Reality. I'm your host, Mark Zaski. Scott Hundley, thank you for coming on the show, and I look forward to heading back out into the field with you, bud.
Sounds great.
All right, man. Hang on 1 second, and then I'll get us clear of the recording here, and then we can chat for a minute.
All right.
Really think that you can say anything to anyone at any time, no matter how fucked up it is, and somehow to you, you're a hero. But what you fail to realize is that they're watching you too. In the real world,